And finally, we're all here to share resources. So we want to share knowledge as well. Talk to other lending libraries, share and receive institutional knowledge on how we have all gotten started and where we're all at now. There is a new National Tool Library Alliance. It's pretty new, and they've been meeting once a month. If you're interested in joining, you can email me. My email will be at the end of this presentation, and I can send you an invite to that. But it's been pretty valuable to just hear, how other tool libraries function and what they use for different aspects of their programming. And then we also have running notes around past meetings, so you can even look back at other topics that you may have missed. And then I can also offer the Station North Tool Library has open source curriculum. So I've written and archived all of our classes and have shared them with other tool lending libraries or other libraries. And that has been a really great way to connect with other libraries, but also I think could be a good starting place for new lending libraries, especially with new educational programming.
If you have questions, please do put them in the chat. And I've got a couple just to start out. I wonder if you could just go into a little bit of detail about some of the classes that seem to be working really well, that either have been, are a lot of interest, or you found that they're, were income generating. You talked about designing the program in part to fill other gaps in the organization and the work that's being done in the communities. Is there a great example of classes that have worked really well and helped to fill those gaps?
Yeah, definitely. I mentioned like a safety orientation. That is
Mhm.
one of our most popular classes. It's very basic. It's just an orientation to our shop space, and it's a prerequisite for using our public workshop hours. And I think, Barrett, you guys have something similar.
I would say ours is basically the same. The orientation class is definitely our most popular and our most common one, and it's also a great place for people to start.
And then I'll also just add, we have a class, it's called Tools and Skills, and it's a really, again, very beginner friendly class that covers powered hand tools, and it's a really good bridge to the tool lending library space because it covers a lot of the tools that you might borrow in that space. Those are, I think, for me, like the two that have the most impact because it reaches the most amount of people and it connects all of our programming together, connects our open shop hours and our lending library. But then we also have very popular classes that are kind of niche, fun projects that people are really into. So, honing in on like a really nice project that a lot of people might want to make is also a fun and can be successful class.
I got kind of a related follow-up question is, have there been any classes that you have tried or workshops that have really not worked? Or is there any, like, what were the duds and why?
For us, it's hard to say, why something doesn't work. I think the ones that are very obvious to us are ones that just don't really make sense financially for us to run because maybe the material cost is too high, which makes the class itself an expensive class for students. And that could be a reason why it doesn't run well. But at the same time, we have classes that are $250 and they're really popular because they're like a very specific project. It's our knife making class or chef knife making class that does really well. So it's hard to say why things don't work, but there are classes that we have run that we have stopped running because the enrollment was too low. I think we're still kind of trying to figure out why, other than the obvious reason of cost or like it's just too niche of a project. I don't know if Barrett, you have any insight onto this.
Yeah, I know we've had classes in the past that have been hard for us. I know we tried to do welding once and that was pretty difficult for the space and just the effort that had to go into it. We've also had some classes that went well, but we probably wouldn't do again just because there was a lot of setup involved that was a little bit too much for us, as well as it taking too long. Like we had a table building class that went really well, except it went like 3 or 4 weeks over the amount of time that they was supposed to do. So it was just like a lot of time for our workshop to kind of be full of small tables and things like that. So there's definitely like a lot that we've tried that hasn't necessarily done great. But there's also classes that have done really well, except probably won't do it again.
I have a question. One of the things that I'm really interested in about in terms of like classes with the tool libraries and stuff, and you made mention of it during the presentation, is like offering skills to the community that they can then go out and use like to make money and turn their labor into more money. And we're in a rural area there's a lot of unemployment and underemployment. So I was wondering if you could tell me about if you offer any, or anybody out there knows of any classes that like people are using to like then go out into the community and start businesses or like do work or whatever, anything like that.
Yeah, the Station Road Tool Library has had a workforce development program in the past. And it's something, it did run for a bit, like maybe a couple of years. And it was called Surface Project, and it had folks come in and learn woodworking to make like a lot of tabletops and countertops for local businesses like restaurants. And some of those people did go off and like start working in the field. But it was a huge labor lift for us. And at the time, we were a much smaller organization with less staff power, I would say. So yeah, it was definitely a big lift. It was really like cool to see, but it only really impacted, those couple of people that were in the program. And in general, I think what we have found is entrepreneurship is like a whole different skill set that we are not really prepared to offer classes around. It's something that other maker spaces do, and they provide programs for it. Here at the Station North Tool Library, though, I think it's very beginner focused, and we kind of focus on people coming into the space and having access to these tools to then just enrich their own life, not necessarily their, income. But we do have people who use the lending library as a way to supplement, if they're a handy person, supplement their tools for their business. So I would say the lending library may be a little bit more focused on making things accessible for people who want to have businesses. But the education, it might get someone started on their journey to that makes them want to learn more woodworking and then open up a furniture shop. But I think it's hard, it's hard. We're trying to be realistic around like what actual capacity do we have in playing a big role in somebody's like career path. There's a lot of benefits to that, but I think there's also a lot of benefits to just life enrichment and like community building, which we do pretty well here.
I've got a quick one actually. I was talking to thank you first of all, guys, really interesting, really dense, a lot there. I went to an event recently and they just put a paywall up. They had been asking for donations and they were getting a little bit of money coming in. And this was the first time that they'd actually put a paywall up, and they were absolutely dumbfounded by how much more money they had made. So I just wondered if I don't know if there is a structure that has worked for you, or anything that you've noticed from your 30 classes. Do you have different structures, pay structures for different events?
Totally. It's very interesting. We're also kind of learning that same lesson right now. We just started identity-based programming here, and we're offering it at a sliding scale at this point. But we had kind of piloted the program with offering a free class. And it was a free tools and skills class for women, trans, and non-binary people. And we found that like offering it free meant that like half of the people didn't show up. And then as we, worked on developing this program a little bit more, and we offered a sliding scale version of this class, it meant that people actually were committed to coming to class, one, because they had to pay for the class. But then it was really interesting to see like how many people actually paid the full cost of the class. in our sliding scale language. And it's not, I guess it's not a true sliding scale, because basically we had real costs and sliding scale costs, and the sliding scale cost was half the price of the real cost of the class. And it was interesting to see how many people paid that full cost. That's a really big thing that we're learning and trying to figure out here. Our whole organization runs sliding scale, and we generally give advice of like, think about your annual income and give us like this percentage of your annual income. The language we actually use for membership is like $1 for every $1,000 you make annually. But that like limits a lot of our revenue generation, because actually there are people who are members of the library taking classes with us that make like $200,000 a year, and they're only paying like $50 for this class, when they could actually pay more and subsidize other class takers who can't pay as much. So it's like a balance, but we have found that actually putting up some amount of paywall, I guess, like charging something for the class, makes it so that people, one, like come to class, and then two, they have to make, if you open the option around how people can pay for the class, it forces people in a good way, I think, to make an assessment of like how they're benefiting the project of the tool lending library, and how their privilege can actually impact their payment, which helps us make more money to make these programs continue to run.
Yeah, I think we are kind of experimenting in a similar way, where we're still working on a lot of the, logistics of pricing our classes, but we do have a suggested donation that's posted. That is something that we've somewhat determined based off of how much we think the class is worth, and also similar classes in the area. But there's also always an option that is posted for people if they're like can't pay for that. We can waive the fee, and that's not a big deal, which doesn't happen very often, honestly, even though it is an option for people. But I think there's definitely room for us to like grow in the sliding scale of things, because I do think people often would pay more than we are requiring from them.
Thanks, guys. Really informative. And really interesting how kind of psychological it is as well, to encourage people to firstly attend, but then to pay what they think it's worth.
Yeah.
Thank you.
A couple other ways that I've seen it done is there's an upfront cost, and then if you go through the entire program, there's some amount of like giveaways, like a tool or this or that, right? That is equal to or maybe less than the cost of tuition. And so there is a cost and reward beyond just the class itself or the event or whatever it is. But there is a fixed investment from the participants to get through. And another way that I've seen is that even for like free classes or things like that, where there's a cost up front, and if you complete the whole thing, you get your money back at the end. And so then there's just another incentive for people to come through it. Yeah, and Bill, love your idea about having some other non-monetary way of contributing. I don't know if you want to just come off mic and say anything.
I was typing essentially what you just said.
Okay.
Is that they pay for it up front because that reduces your no-shows, which are a huge pain. And if it's free, people can sign up, but just give it not show up on a whim. But if they have to pay something up front, but when they can basically, it can be different in how, whether they just need to request or what they need to do to get the subsidy or to get it for free. But they get that either if it's a multiple part class, they have to have a certain level of participation or do the post class review or something that concludes, okay, now you'll get your $50 back or whatever it was, depending on how involved the class or class series is.
And I think of kind of a hybrid, just got my mind thinking about other things that I've seen, is a list of like, hey, this is the cost of doing this, and these are ways to contribute to make this thing a success. Contribute financially. You could do some amount of promotion and have different ways for people. And sometimes I've seen it like gamified, where there's point values for different ways of contributing as well. I'm not somebody that is inspired by that gamification for things. So when I've seen those personally, they haven't compelled me, but I've seen them a number of times to the point that maybe it's a sign that they do work for others. I'm not sure if anybody has an experience doing that kind of.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, we haven't done any gamification here. I mean, we've made games that people can
Yeah.
participate in, but we haven't made any of our like organizational structure gamified for folks that I can think of. I think, you know, a really just powerful thing is really getting people to understand like what, yeah, like you were saying, Tom, like what are the real costs of running this type of program? You know, I think when I would teach safety, shop safety to people, and I'm introing them to the organization, a big thing that I talk about is just like how we can be sustainable. And that is by people becoming members and by people donating during our annual fundraiser. And I think you like sell like what the library is and the resource, the like amazing resource that it provides. And just people having a better understanding of the sharing economy and how they can plug into it, and how valuable it is to not only them but to their community, people they might not even know. So I think for us what has worked is really trying to connect people together, both in like education around, you know, the things that we offer education in, but also education around like how they can make an impact through the tool library. And you know, is it that like a dollar amount, or is that even just coming into Open Shop and being a part of the community that makes projects here and inspires others and encourages their friend to take class? For us, I think what has worked is really just like making people feel a part of our community to a point where they want to invest in.
I think whenever you can build in a sense of belonging, you know, again, you said being part of the community, but that's that feeling of belonging, and not just the feeling, but the actual opportunity to belong to something. Then it's shared, you know, and so it's this is the shared output, this is the shared experience, and then there's can be more of an openness for sharing the cost of making that happen.